Okay, this query, query 15, our last query, is very closely related to query 12. If you remember in query 12, what we were doing was working out how many product types were on each invoice. Well, in this one, we're working out the actual number of products in each invoice. So, in other words, how many products does she sell at one time? Okay, so if we're talking about number of products on each invoice, then we're talking about invoices and products, and the only way that we can join those together is via line item. So our join is going to be invoice join line item join product, which we already have done in query 12. And then what we need is the number of products on each invoice. So let's go back to our query that we left in query 12, and you remember that we were looking at the count as the product types, which gave us the count of the lines. Now what we actually need to do this time is we need to sum the quantity. Okay, so we need to sum the quantity. Let's go back to the ERD to have a look at what we're doing. So the quantity, if you remember, was how many products on a particular line that they sold. So if you were looking at if you were removing the group by, then you would end up with a whole heap of different lines, and each line would have the product name and then how many of that product was in that invoice. So what we want to do is add up those numbers within an invoice to work out how many products altogether have been sold in an invoice. So sum quantity will give us that. It just means it's summing that quantity column. So don't get confused with count star, which is counting the number of rows, and sum quantity. Sum quantity is counting the numbers within an actual column, within the quantity column. And we won't want to call it product types anymore. We will call it total products, because that's the total products for this particular invoice. Okay, we still want to group it by the invoice number because we want to find out per invoice. A good way to think about group by is if you're starting to describe your problem and you can say per something. So a certain number per day, or a certain number per year, or a certain number per sale, or a certain number per order, or whatever. If you can say it in that way, then generally you're looking at a group by. So in this case we're saying the quantity per invoice. So we're grouping by the invoice number. Okay, and so let's just have a look at that. And you can see that now, if you remember, our 35007 used to be 3, but there was 2 products on each line. So now it's summing those instead of just counting the lines. So now there's 6 products per invoice on that particular invoice, and it's given us the number of products on each of the invoices. Okay, so that's query 15, and that is the last of the queries that we're doing on this workshop. I recommend strongly that you now go through the case study queries, case study 2, because you will most probably understand a lot more about where the structure is coming from. Thanks.